بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. This is week 4 and the final week of the fiqh of fasting and zakat. And last week we covered about half of zakat. The remaining half has to do with debt, both debt payable and receivable, and how zakat is calculated on that. And finally, the last thing is how zakat is to be paid. So who is entitled to receive it, when must it be given, and what are the conditions for its validity. So when it comes to debt, first of all, we're going to talk about debt receivable. So this is the good kind of debt. This is when somebody owes you money, or in institution money, right? But in this case, we're not talking about institutions, we're talking about people. So if somebody owes you money, then how does zakat work on that? So in Arabic, debt is referred to as ad-dain. So not deen with a kasra, dain with a fatha. Dain is debt. And there are two types of debt. The first is ad-dainul qawi, or strong debt. And the second is ad-dainul al-dha'if, and this is weak debt. So the definition of a strong debt is debt that arises from the forwarding of loans or goods sold. So this means that either somebody has loaned somebody money for which on credit, basically, that okay, you need to borrow $5,000, here's $5,000, and you need to give me back $5,000. If the condition is that you need to give me back more than $5,000, obviously that's not permissible, that's a riba, but a permissible kind of loan, right? So that's so if I am the one that has loaned you money, and you owe this money to me. So in this situation, I am the creditor and you are the debtor, right? So you are in debt and I am the one that is owed money, i.e. I am the creditor. So in this circumstance, either it's money that has been loaned out, or second is if I sold you something and you have yet to pay it. So if I sold you anything, literally, but it has to be a tangible product, not a service. A service is the second kind of debt that we'll talk about in a moment, but an actual physical product for which money is owed to me. So, if I have a store and I sold you, I don't know, a phone, a car, a sofa, a mattress, a book, whatever it is that I sold you, an actual tangible product that you owe me money for, in both of these circumstances, I, the creditor, have to pay zakat on that amount of money that you owe. So, because it's my money. So, at the end of the year, when I am calculating zakat, I need to add what you owe me to my total zakatable assets and give zakat on that. There are two things of note here. Number one is it is permissible to defer the zakat payment until I actually receive the money. So I must calculate it and I must add it to my zakat of that year, but if I don't have the money, so let's say, and this is quite often the case, right? So it's not that people are poor, it's just that they don't have liquid capital, so they don't have cash on hand. So, their money is tied up in different things. So that's fine. So let's say, I have loaned one person $10,000, another person $5,000, somebody else $20,000. So by no stretch of the imagination am I poor. But if one were to look in the bank account, and the person who has all of these different people that owe him money, but in his possession he only has maybe a couple of $1,000s, right? So this person is not poor, but this person is just not liquid. The person doesn't have access to his money. So therefore he still needs to calculate the zakat that is due on him, but he can defer payment of that zakat until he actually acquires possession of that money. And this is year after year. So if you haven't paid me at the end of another year, still last year's zakat is due, and I must add what you owe me back to this year's zakat minus what is already supposed to have been paid in zakat. So you understand how this works. Year after year, you need to add it to your calculation. The second thing is that So the flexibility is that you can defer the payment of the zakat. The second thing is, it is permissible to make it a condition of giving the loan that you have to pay zakat on it. This is a permissible condition to make. And there is some difference of opinion, but among the scholars in this regard, but this is, generally speaking, this is a permissible condition. Basically, that when I loan you the $5,000, I tell you that, annually, until you pay me this amount back, you have to discharge the zakat on this money. And then it becomes your responsibility if you accept this condition. So this is a permissible condition, and many people, because first of all, it's an interest-free loan, so the person is not making any money. And if this is a long-term loan, then in addition to not making any money, because it's impermissible to make money off of money, this person is also giving zakat. Whereas if this person's money were to be put in a business venture, then it could have appreciated, he could have made a profit. So the fact that he is he's loaning you money interest-free, it is permissible for him to make this a condition on you, that you have to discharge the zakat of this money, and then it would become your responsibility, even if you are technically poor. Poor means that you don't meet the threshold of nisab, but the money that you have borrowed on the condition that you will give zakat on it, that money you still need to give zakat on. So let's say somebody zakat is not obligatory on them, but they have a $10,000 debt, and the creditor has made it a condition that you have to give zakat annually on these $10,000 until you pay me back. So even if he doesn't fulfill the other criteria of zakat, he still needs to give zakat on these $10,000, because that's not his zakat that he's giving, he's discharging zakat on behalf of his creditor. So that is a permissible condition. The second, so that was a strong debt. A strong debt is either somebody owes, you loan somebody money and that's why they owe you, or you sold someone a tangible product and that's why they owe you money. The weak debt is debt arising without the exchange of tangible goods. So let's say, let's say that you did a job for me, right? I hired you to, clean my windows, right? And I told you I will pay you $500 if you clean all of the windows of the masjid over here, and then I never paid you, right? So this is a debt that if this was our contract and our agreement, and I have not paid you, this is a debt, right? I do owe you this money, but it's considered a weak debt because there was no tangible exchange of good. That you never, I never gave you anything, or you never gave me anything that I can touch and feel, right? Tangible means something that you can hold in your hand, basically. So, because this is a service that you provided, and if you have not yet, so this is a debt, right? So this debt that is basically it's your money that I owe you, right? So in this situation, but because you don't yet have possession of this, and this wasn't a tangible exchange of goods, then you don't have to give zakat on that amount of money that I owe you until you actually receive it, right? The same goes like, sometimes there are, collective bargaining agreements, right? That take place, that are very drawn out, right? So, people go on strike, there are certain demands, and, if you are Muslim, if you are in the midst of those, right? Or if there is an agreement that is already on the table that is yet to be executed. So let's say that, your union goes on strike, right? And, finally after all of the drama and disagreement and negotiations, you are awarded some sort of a large settlement, right? And this is on paper, this is already done, this is, it just needs to be executed. And in the midst of that, let's say it's meant to be executed on April 15th, April 15th will be the last, in the last 10 days of Ramadan. And let's say the 15th of Ramadan is when your zakat anniversary is, and that's when you have to calculate your zakat. So although that money is owed to you, but you still haven't taken possession of this, therefore you don't need to add that to your zakat at this point, right? until you actually receive this. And this is important because sometimes this is, we're talking about large sums of money. If you sued someone and you won, right, and now they owe you money, and it's a large amount of money. Sometimes this is like, hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're talking about, but you haven't received this, right? Until you don't actually receive this, then because why would you sue someone? Maybe it's for damages, maybe it's for something else. It's not a tangible exchange of goods, right? So there's nothing that exchanged hands over here. So therefore, until you don't actually receive that money, you don't have to add it to your zakatable assets. So and in addition to this, so in the strong debt, if the creditor gets his money back years later, he still needs to give zakat on past years. I told you need to calculate it annually. But let's say that in the weak debt scenario, I owe you some money because of some work that you did. I didn't give it to you this year. I didn't give it to you next year. I didn't give it to you the year after that. You're hopeless. And then, one day, I don't know, like I had a near-death experience and I came knocking on your door and said, brother, I almost died today. I owe you some money here. Take this money, right? And you got this years later, so you don't need to retroactively pay zakat on previous years because at that time you were not, you didn't possess this money actually. So this is receivable debt. This is an accounting term, bad debt. Everybody knows what all debt is bad, but in accounting, bad debt means the debt that you have lost hope in recovering, right? So there's either like this is official, so some people they file for bankruptcy and therefore congratulations everybody that that they owed money to either gets nothing or they get pennies on the dollar for what they actually owed them. There are laws that govern this, and sometimes it's not like an official thing. Nobody filed for bankruptcy, but you have come to the realization that this person that owes you money is never going to give you that money, right? So in this situation, there are two scenarios over here. One is that. By the way, this has to do with strong debt, right? In the weak debt, so if it's because of a service that you've provided, then it doesn't really matter if the person who owes you money acknowledges it or doesn't acknowledge it. You only have to give zakat when you actually receive it. This has to do with strong debt. Strong debt means the money it's actually a loan, right? So you gave somebody money. Now that person, he's not paying you back. That much is a guarantee. This person, he's either acknowledging the debt, so he does agree that he does owe you money. He's just not paying you, or the second scenario is that he doesn't acknowledge it. He's like, I don't know you, what money? When did you give me money? I don't know what you're talking about, right? This also happens, unfortunately, sometimes, right? This is why the longest verse in the Quran is the verse about writing down debt transactions. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا تداينتم بدين إلى أجل مسمى فاكتبوه وليكتب بينكم كاتب بالعدل ولا يأبى كاتب أن يكتب كما علمه الله فليكتب وليملل الذي عليه الحق. This is one verse, right? So this is not like many verses. The single longest verse in the Quran has to do with what? It doesn't have to do with Jannah or Jahannam or anything like that. It has to do with transactional law. That when you owe someone or when you conduct a transaction, then it's necessary that there is a paper trail. So this paper trail stuff is not a modern invention. Allah is telling you in the Quran that you should write this down. And this is why there is a saying in the Arabic language, تعاشروا كالإخوان وتعاملوا كالأجانب, that you live like brothers, but your transactions and your dealings amongst yourselves when it comes to business and when it comes to money, this is like strangers. So we live like brothers, but when it comes to money and when it comes to transactions, we transact like strangers. So hypothetically, if you have a store, everybody walking into the store is not your friend, is not your relative. Half of the people you're never really going to see them again. So how would you interact with this person, right? If the person were to buy a cart full of things that's worth, a couple of $100, and then they say that, oh, I don't have the money right now, maybe I can pay you back later, you'll probably say, go put the stuff back, right? That, I don't know you, you don't know me, there's no relationship here, this is a business, this is not a charity, right? So the same way that when it comes to business dealings, you deal with each other like you are strangers. So you do your diligence, you make sure everything is transparent, there is no ambiguity in the contract. And when it comes to just living amongst yourselves, amongst ourselves, we live like brothers, but we transact like strangers. This is a golden rule that you should remember, and this goes with everybody, right? So there are so many conflicts in our community that arise even in families from what? That let's say two cousins or two brothers, they enter into a business venture together, and they think that, this is my cousin or this is my brother, and therefore, what contract, what writing stuff down, this is not necessary, this is, we know each other, we've known each other for a long time, we grew up together, etc., etc. And then, because money is money, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says regarding the human being, وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. The human being loves money, right? So money, the amount of problems that arises from such transactions is, it literally tears families apart sometimes, right? And people don't speak to each other for years, and there are hard feelings. So you want to avoid this, and if you must conduct business with family members, with relatives, then you need to make sure that it is completely transparent, in the same way that you would conduct business with me. That's the same way that you conduct business with your uncle or with your cousin or with anybody else, right? So this is the way, and this is an Islamic principle, right? So if the debtor acknowledges the debt, the creditor has to pay zakat as normal on the debt receivable. However, if the creditor is unable to acquire his debt from the debtor, he's not liable to pay zakat. So if he acknowledges the debt, right? If he says, yes, I do owe you money, but he's just not able to take it from him, he's just not able to recover his debt, then in that circumstance, he's not liable to pay zakat, if this person acknowledges the debt. And if one day, right, this person, because he's acknowledging the debt, he comes back one day, years later, and he gives you the money that he owes you, right? He's acknowledging the debt, and but you're just not able to get it from him, right? So he says, yes, I do owe you money, I understand, but this, that, my cat died, I had a car accident, that I invested in something and it went down the drain, my roof is leaking, he's finding one excuse after another to not give you your money, and you have lost hope that, I'm never going. He does tell you that he owes you money, he acknowledges it, he's not denying it, but you've lost hope that you're ever going to get this money out of him, therefore you have written it off a long time ago. So you are not liable to pay zakat on it currently. And if this person comes around one day, maybe he went in Jamaat for 40 days or something like this, and Allah gave him some tawfiq, and this person comes and says, brother, all these years later, this is money that I owe you, here you take it, right? Because he was acknowledging this, then this person needs to give zakat on that money for previous years, right? If one day he doesn't have to give zakat on it every year, right? He doesn't have to even add it to his calculation. But if this person is acknowledging the debt and then years later this person pays it, then you have to retroactively pay zakat on that money. If this person is not acknowledging the debt, this person says, what money? Me and you, I don't know you. Never got any money from you, don't know what you're talking about, right? And then this person, so obviously the creditor has written this off, there's no way to get this money, and this person years later, now this person comes and gives you money. In this circumstance, you don't have to retroactively pay zakat in previous years. You only have to add what this person has given you to that year's zakat calculation. So the difference in both scenarios is whether or not the debtor acknowledges the debt. okay? And don't loan such people money that are not going to return it to you. They make life harder for you, right? So, and sorry, one thing that one can do is in the first scenario over here, where the debtor acknowledges the debt and this person has lost hope in recovering it, he can make intention that this is sadaqah, right? This, you don't owe me anything anymore, this is sadaqah. But when this person then, so you don't have to give zakat on it, but if this person later on, years later, comes and gives it to you, then you have to be truthful and sincere in your intention. You made intention of sadaqah, therefore it needs to go to sadaqah. Okay? So you don't have to calculate zakat on it for previous years, but you need to be sincere and genuine with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your intention. So you can't use this as just, a zakat loophole. You have to actually give it in sadaqah. Debt payable. So if you owe someone money, so there are two types of debt. One is a short-term debt, one is a long-term debt. A short-term debt, Islamically, is defined by anything that is due within the next 12 months. This is short-term. Short-term is not zakatable, so you can you can deduct the payments that are due on that debt within the next 12 months. You can deduct this because it is, it's due within the next 12 months. So you can deduct the entirety of that debt from your zakatable assets. So let's say you have a total of, $100,000 to your name that are zakatable. You need to give zakat on this, but you owe somebody $20,000 that is due within the next couple of months, within the next 12 months. Therefore, you only have to give zakat on $80,000 because that $20,000 is not yours. It's somebody else's that is due in the short term. So that is pretty simple, it's straightforward. Long-term debt is, these are liabilities that are not payable within the next 12 months. This includes things like mortgages, right? So if someone has a mortgage, again, this is not a fatwa on the permissibility or impermissibility of a mortgage, this is just the zakat part of it, right? So if somebody does have a mortgage, obviously the entirety of your mortgage is not going to be due in the next 12 months. This is a long-term contract. That's why it's called a mortgage, by the way, right? So mort means death. So this is a debt that you take with you to your grave, right? So this is if somebody has a mortgage, right, then it is permissible for them to deduct the payments for the next 12 months, or the actual payments that are due, or the amount that they intend to pay, that they actually intend to pay, because there is a certain percentage above the actual minimum payments that you are allowed to contribute at the end of each year towards that will go entirely to the capital. So if you intend to do this, so let's say that your mortgage payments for the next 12 months is like $24,000, but you intend to at the end of the year pay an additional $15,000 or $20,000, right? So you can add this you can deduct this from your zakat liability. So whatever that amount is, so let's say if it's going to be just $24,000, you can deduct $24,000 from your zakatable assets. The only thing here is that it is not permissible to deduct interest payments from zakat calculations. So when it comes to a mortgage, this becomes a little bit tricky, right? So have you ever seen in amortization graph how it works, right? So the way that this will work is, if you have a mortgage and let's say it's, you have an amortization period of 40 years or 25 years or whatever you have chosen, right? So in the beginning, in the initial days of you paying that mortgage, a lesser amount is going to go towards your principal, and a greater amount is actually going to go towards the interest portion of your loan. And as you gain equity, and as you begin paying off your loan, a greater amount will actually go towards the capital and a lesser amount to the interest. So you don't really need to understand this entirely. Just go online and search for an amortization calculator and punch in your payments and whatever. Or you don't even need to go there. Just you have a mortgage. I'm assuming it's not somebody that gave it to you. It's a bank. So they have already given this to you, right? So you can deduct the next 12 months payments minus interest, right? So what this will mean is if you just got your mortgage yesterday, then there is very little that you will deduct, right? Because more of it is actually going to the interest. But if you have been steadily paying off your mortgage for the past 20 years, then there will be a greater sum that you will be able to deduct from your zakat liability, because the portion of interest that is in your monthly payments is actually less, and the portion that goes towards the capital is more. If you don't understand how this works, say Alhamdulillah, right? That you don't have a mortgage. So, also any other liabilities that are due within the next 12 months are also permissible to deduct, and these have to be actual liabilities, not potential liabilities. So actual liabilities are things that are actually due within the next 12 months. So, for example, mortgage payments are actual liabilities. Rent is not considered an actual liability because it's not a loan, right? So it's a fee for space, basically. It's a rental contract. So you cannot deduct rent payments. You can also not deduct things like your forecasted hydro bill, because that's not an actual liability, that's a potential future liability. You can deduct property taxes, for example, because this is not a potential future liability. This is due within the next 12 months. So anything that's actually due. So you understand what an actual liability is versus a potential, because potential is like limitless, right? So you can say that, inshallah, this year I plan on going for vacation with my family of 6. So this means that I will have a potential liability of like $27,000. Therefore, I'm going to deduct this from my zakat. No, you can't do that, right? This has to be actual liabilities that are due upon you. So things that are deductible are like outstanding living expenses. So outstanding means the things that are already due. So if you have, if your property tax bill has come in, this is an actual outstanding liability. You need to pay this. If there is income tax that you owe, this is also a liability that you need to pay the government. If you already know this, then you can deduct this, not potential future income tax. So you can't deduct the income tax for 2022 when you're giving zakat right now, because that's a future potential liability, right? But 2021, if you already owe money to the government, then you can deduct that, because that is money that's not yours, that belongs to someone else. Goods purchased on credit. So if you financed a car, for example, it is permissible for you to deduct the payments for the next 12 months minus interest, because this is an actual liability, it's not a potential liability. Outstanding salaries and service fees. So this is if you own a business and you owe money to your employees, then you can deduct this from your zakat calculations. Outstanding mahr, only if you intend to pay it in the next 12 months, right? This is important. Why is it important? Especially, for example, in Arab cultures, we have a muqaddam and the muakhar portion of the mahr. So this is the upfront amount and the deferred amount. The upfront amount is usually a smaller amount, somewhere in the couple of $1,000 range, and the deferred amount is usually a significantly larger amount, right? So this is like $50,000 or $100,000, or depending on the circumstance of the person and who they are, right? So this person is never going to pay zakat if he deducts this every year. Right. So you can't deduct that unless you actually intend to pay this in the next 12 months, right? So mahr payments you can deduct only if they have, technically, if one has a mahr that they have agreed to, then the wife, if it is outstanding, then the wife has the right to demand her mahr at any time during the marriage. Right? So let's say you agreed to a mahar of like $20,000 deferred, right? So I will pay it one day, inshallah, right? So if you agreed to this, and it is a credit, right? So it's not, and this is not there's also one thing here, that there are certain cultures where the mu'akhar portion is only due upon death or divorce. So not that, if that is the urf of the people and the custom of the people, then that is a different story. But generally, like in the Desi culture, Indo-Pakistan culture, there is no muqaddam and mu'akhar, there's only one mahar, right? So this is the mahar, and if it is credit, so let's say your mahar was $20,000, and it was not paid, it's credit, and your wife is not asking for it, really nobody, everybody forgot about it, and one day she remembers, hey, you owe me $20,000, I want it. She has the right to ask for it, you agreed to it, therefore you have to give it to her. So this is something you want to be careful about before you enter into a contract that that you will not be able to honor. There is, in the Afghani culture, it is a custom to haggle about the mahar, right? So I came to know about this many years ago when I conducted the first Afghani nikah of mine that that I was ever present for, and I sat down and I asked what the mahar is, and they say that we haven't agreed to it yet. I said, okay, so it's a requirement of the Sharia that there is a mahar, so I need one, so you can discuss it. He says, yes, that's why you are here, Sheikh, we're going to discuss it now. And then mashallah, they had a very heated discussion. It started at like $1 million and it ended at like 5,000, right? So it's so apparently I later came to know that this is, nobody was ever actually expecting $1 million, but it's just like, part of the whole custom and culture. So now typically I ask if the bride and groom are both Afghani. I tell you finish your negotiation before I actually arrive there, because I don't have time to participate in this, right? So this is, everybody has their own urf, their own culture. Zakat on shares. So this is, we're going to do this quickly, inshallah. So shares are basically, in layman's terms, they are a small portion of someone's business that you own, right? So shares. So people generally purchase shares as an investment. They're purchased for one of two reasons. Most commonly, especially like swing trading and relatively so long term means like you intend to sell this in the next 2 to 5 years, let's say, right? So this would be, in the investing world, this is short term, right? So in the next 2 to 5 years, so you purchase something with the express intention that in the next couple of years this company's value is going to go up, therefore the value of each share is going to go up, and then I'm going to sell it and I'm going to make a profit. So my intention in purchasing that share is what? That I'm going to sell it when the price increases. So zakat is payable on the entire value of that investment on the day that you calculate zakat every year. There are that one is actually pretty simple. The second is you are holding this investment. So your intention is at the in the corner of your mind somewhere, you have the intention that one day if you have to sell it, you'll sell it. But the primary reason that you purchase this is because this by purchasing this share of said business, this you are entitled to their depending on how quarterly or annual dividend that they pay. So this is usually like very well established companies that have a track record. They're relatively stable. They are they are, for all intents and purposes, in terms of asbab, they are too big to fail, right? So it's that's why people purchase them, because they are safe. And they're not really expecting any wild fluctuations in the valuation of that share. What they purchase it for, because this is a relatively stable company, its valuation is stable, and they pay a stable dividend. So these are companies like IBM and Intel and all of these companies that have been around, since your grandfather's time, and they are still here, right? So these sorts of companies. The reason people purchase this is because they intend to receive the dividends. This is their primary intention. So in this circumstance, you can give zakat in one of two ways. So obviously on the dividends that you receive, you have to add those to your zakat calculations if you are still in possession of them on the day of your zakat. So like, if you received the quarterly dividend and then you had, some giant party at your home, and on the day that, you gave zakat, you don't have that anymore, then congratulations, no zakat on that, right? But if you are holding on to this on the day that you have to calculate zakat, then you need to add it to your zakat calculations. And with whatever is remaining, you can give zakat in one of two ways. The easy and simple way is that you just give zakat on the value of that investment on the day of that you are giving zakat. This is simple, it's straightforward, it's less hassle. If you really like doing math, if you are an accountant, if you like paperwork, then what you will do is there is a difficult way to give zakat on the value of this, right? So what you need to do is you need to ascertain the value of the business that you are investing in for the purpose of taking the dividends that they give. So you need to look at the value of this business's fixed assets versus their current assets. So how will you do this? You will do this by going through the balance sheet that they issue at the end of the year, right? So you will read the report, you will see, okay, this business is worth this much, and in terms of their valuation, how it is valued. So they have X amount of chairs that are worth this much minus the depreciation in value from last year. So therefore this year they have like this many $1,000s worth of chairs, and this many $1,000s worth of tables, and this many $1,000s worth of other things that are regarded as fixed assets. Fixed assets are those things that the business uses to generate income. It's not the things that they actually sell. It's the things that they utilize in the course of their day-to-day business. So this includes like many different things. So there are some examples here. Fixed assets are like, if it's an office, obviously there's going to be places where people sit, there's going to be desks that people write on, there are going to be computers that people have. These sorts of things, they are also included in the value of that business. And they are fixed assets. This also includes, for example, cars that the company owns. All of these things, they are technically not zakatable. So if you can't understand it from the point of view of your investment in the shares, take a step back and think of, if you have a small business. Let's say you have a shop, right? So in your shop you sell something. So let's say it's a bookshop. So the product that you sell is books, okay? So the books, obviously, you need to give zakat on, we talked about this last week, the retail value of the books that you have in your store and in your warehouse. But there are other things in your store. So there are, fixtures in your store, there are shelves in your store, there are tables in your store, there are other things inside your store that you own, but these are income generating tools. This is not the product itself. So you only have to give zakat on your business stock and not those tools. So if you understand it from your own business, then now it's easier to understand it from a large company's point of view, that there are things that they use also to generate income, and then there is the actual business that they are in. So you need to ascertain this value, so the value of fixed assets and the value of their current assets. So current assets are like cash, receivables, if they have loaned, if they have outstanding dues from people. So businesses, many of them, they operate on a membership model. So the membership that they collect from people, this is if whatever is outstanding. In fact, on this day that we are doing this, many people, they don't know that the largest bank in the world, you know what this is? No, not the largest, but the most liquid bank in the world. Nope. The most liquid bank in the world is actually Starbucks, right? So why? Is because Starbucks, if you go to Starbucks, you have you are incentivized to use the app or to use a card, right? So they will give you points for using this. And basically the way that that app or that card will work is that you need to load money into there. So you can load like $25, $50, $100, whatever you want. And you will use that money to buy coffee, right, at some point in time. But until you actually use that money to buy coffee, who has access to that money? Starbucks. So Starbucks is the most liquid bank in the world, right? They literally have access to millions and millions of dollars that you and I have deposited into our cards and our apps to use at Starbucks. But before you use them, this is money that they have access to because you have already deposited it, right? You will buy something with it at some point, but not like right now, right? So anyways, that receivables are part of current assets. So current assets are zakatable, fixed assets are not. So if you want to give zakat the hard way, then you need to look at the balance sheet, you need to see the ratio of current versus fixed assets, and then whatever your holding in that company is, you give zakat on that ratio. So let's say 60% of or 70% of the company that you hold is current assets, and the remaining 30% are fixed assets. So you only need to give zakat on 70% of the value of the share that you hold, technically, right? But this is tedious, right? This is very time consuming because usually you don't have just like one company in your portfolio, right? So, people don't make money that way, right? So you don't usually just buy one company and that's it. That's the one that you have for the rest of your life, right? You probably have several dozen companies if your portfolio is being managed correctly. So to do this with each one of them, to go through this sheet with each one of them is because by the end of it, you're just going to sell all of that and you're just going to keep the cash underneath your mattress at home, right? So this is, you just give zakat. Usually my advice is it's easier to just give zakat on the entire value of your holding at that time. And, it's definitely safer, it's less time consuming, but it is up to you at the end of the day, right? So this is like a very old example from back when BlackBerry was actually profitable. You can see that, this example is, if he owns $1,000 in shares, the value is $1,000 on the day that he's giving zakat, and he looked at the ratio, and 40% were fixed assets and 60% were current assets, then he would only add $600 to his zakat calculation, and the remaining is not zakatable. So this brings us to the final portion, and this is actually paying zakat. So number one, you have to have the intention of paying zakat when you are giving zakat, and you can make the intention at either the time of separating the zakat from the remainder of your wealth, or from the time of giving zakat to the recipient or to your agent, right? So many of us, we don't give zakat directly to the recipient, right? There is tawqil that is taking place. You make, usually in organization, the agent of distribution for you and your zakat. So your zakat is due as soon as the transfer of ownership takes place, either between you and the recipient or you and your agent. Now this is where there is something that, there is a troublesome issue sometimes in the Muslim community, where agents of distributing zakat, they hold on to people's zakat funds for excessively long times. So it's understandable that, the moment you give an organization your zakat is, they're not going to distribute it the very next day, right? So that makes sense. But this is relatively modern issue, first of all, that because once upon a time zakat used to be handled by the government, not like the government of Canada, but the government of a Muslim country, and it would go to Baytul Mal, and they would take care of it. But now we have organizations in the West, and sometimes they hold on to large amounts of zakat funds for years and years, right? So this is not correct, Right? This is not something that should happen. It's not that I expect them to deplete their zakat funds within, like 60 days or something like this, but, it should come full circle, preferably within 12 months, right? Within 12 months, they should deplete the zakat that is given to them, because this zakat is given to them by people in order for them to then give it to the intended recipients, right? So therefore, like imagine this, right? That you gave me your zakat to go and give to someone because, I'm traveling to a place that has poor people or something. And then, it's not that I used your zakat, but I kept it with me. I went there, I came back, I still have your zakat, right? And then, I went somewhere else and I went somewhere else and, I gave your zakat to the people that you told me to give them to, but not right now. I gave them to 3 years later. So how would you feel about that, right? So this is kind of what happens in the context of not all, but some Muslim charities. So this is something that one should do their own due diligence in this regard. That zakat, first of all, their zakat policy should be correct. That zakat is actually being given to people who deserve to receive zakat, because this is a religious obligation. And the second is that they should be discharging this obligation in a timely manner. And a timely manner means that roughly within 12 months, at least, of your giving them the zakat, this zakat is actually used. And it's fairly easy to ascertain this, right? Because if they are a charity and if they are registered, then they will publish an annual report. And in the annual report, you will be able to see how much zakat came in last year versus how much zakat was given, right? Because if they are doing it correctly, they should have a separate zakat account. So it's not that it has to match dollar for dollar, but there should not be a huge discrepancy in this amount. So let's say $1 million worth of zakat came in, and last year we only distributed $250,000. So what happened to the other $750,000, right? So we shouldn't hold on to people's zakat for excessively long periods of time. A condition of zakat is the transfer of ownership. So tamlik is a condition of zakat, and this is how it works, right? You have to there has to be a physical exchange of ownership, right? So this is why, for example, there is a common question that we receive at the BC Muslim Association, and this is that someone who is poor has passed away, right? And of course we have access to zakat funds, and this person cannot afford burial, right? So the BCMA can waive their fee, but the cemetery is not going to waive their fee, and the cost of the grave, they're not going to waive that fee either. So there are still some money that needs to be given, right? So therefore, the question that often comes, and that has come over the years many times to the religious board, is can we use zakat money to pay for this person's grave and associated costs, right? And the answer to this is yes and no, right? So know that you can't use it directly. So you can't just cut a check from the zakat account and say that this is going to this person's so-and-so's burial expenses. Why can't you do that? In order to possess something, you have to be alive, right? So tamlik cannot take place if the recipient is dead, okay? So this transfer of ownership is a requirement of zakat. So this cannot take place if the recipient is deceased. So therefore, what needs to happen is, usually if this person is poor, then the family is also poor, right? So it's not only he is poor and the rest of the family is very rich, right? So that usually is not how it works, right? So what we do is we do cover from zakat if there is a need, but we don't give the zakat to the person who is deceased, because this ownership cannot be transferred. Rather, this zakat funds are given to the surviving family member who is eligible to receive zakat, and then this person uses that money to cover the burial expenses. right? Because this is permissible, because this person, if he or she is eligible to receive zakat, then we can give them zakat. And then they can use that zakat to cover the burial expenses. We cannot just transfer zakat money to somebody who is deceased. I'm pretty sure the CRA will also have a problem with that, right? But, but from an Islamic point of view, this is also incorrect, right? And this is also important, that the transfer cannot be a compensation for consideration for services. So, like, if somebody done something for you, right? They provided some service for you, right? They detailed your car, right? And then this person is poor, and you decide that I will compensate this person by giving him my zakat. You can't do that, right? Zakat cannot be in lieu of the compensation, right? So you owe somebody money for a service that they have provided. You cannot cover this from your zakat, even if this person is eligible to receive zakat, because you can't benefit from your zakat, right? Remember, we talked about the whole deduction, and whether or not you can or cannot claim this on your tax return. It's the same principle. You cannot benefit from your zakat. So this person provided you a service, you cannot compensate this person from zakat. There are certain exceptions to this, but generally they are abused and they don't apply. So we won't really go into a lot of detail about those. But in principle, you cannot compensate somebody using zakat. So this is the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the recipients of zakat and who they are. إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَالْغَارِمِينَ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ فَرِيضَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ. So, who is going to receive zakat? These are the recipients of zakat, the poor and needy. So, the poor, لِلْفُقَرَاءِ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. So, poor and needy, there is a linguistic difference between a faqir and a miskin, but generally speaking, these are people who don't have who don't meet the threshold of nisab. So, they don't have in their possession the amount of nisab. So, therefore, they are eligible to receive zakat. Debtors, so those individuals who are in debt, and the definition of being in debt is someone whose liabilities exceed their zakatable and surplus assets. So I owe more money than I have, right? So that is what in debt refers to. Travelers are people who even if they are wealthy, but they don't have access to their wealth. This is less of an issue nowadays, but it still at times does arise. So sometimes there are people, for example, who, it's not that they don't have any money, but they just don't have access to their money. So they may have money back home or wherever it is that they came from, but they're stuck here, and they don't have access to that money, right? So if this person is in need, then this person can be assisted using zakat. Right? So Ibn Sabil means the traveler. So these first three categories, right? There's little difference of opinion in this, that these three categories can still, even today, they can receive zakat, right? So we usually concentrate on the poor and needy, but if you know somebody who is in debt, and this debt is not because of some extravagance of theirs, but maybe they incurred some medical expense or something like this, something legitimate that that they are in debt because of this, and that they are in debt and they are having trouble paying off this debt, then by all means you can assist them using your zakat, and you will be rewarded for this. This is one of the categories of eligible recipients of zakat. Same goes for travelers. Now, number 4 is fi sabilillah. Fi sabilillah, generally, initially at least, it referred to those who were mujahideen, right? So those who were out for jihad, and they were, this is a cause that is noble to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and therefore their expenses and they can be helped using zakat funds, right? Today, this category is often used to support zakat for da'wah projects and associated, expenses. So, personally, I almost never support giving zakat in this category, especially in a Western context for Muslims living here. So I believe that this category is perhaps the most abused category of zakat. So if you were to ask me, this should almost never be used in a West. So I understand there is a difference of opinion in this regard. I err on the side of caution in this, and to make sure that people's zakat reach, at least the majority of it is used to actually support those who are in need, right? So I don't support and I don't advise giving zakat to projects, right? Under the guise of fi sabilillah. So whatever, so you can. It's not that I don't tell you to support them. You should support them, just not with zakat, right? So you should support these projects, but just not use your zakat to do this. So things like, da'wah projects, printing of da'wah material, Quran distributions, supporting any other like Islamic media or broadcasting using zakat, even if they claim that this is under the category of fi sabilillah, this is something that, and this is no secret, that this is something that I am strongly against and I don't advise, and in many circumstances I would even consider impermissible. Number 5 is mu'allafatul qulub. These are those non-Muslims or new Muslims whose hearts are drawn nearer to Islam by giving them zakat. There is a famous difference of opinion in this regard with regards to whether this category, it's in the Quran, so it did once upon a time apply. This category is still here or it's not. So the dominant position in the Hanafi school is that this category is abrogated after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. And the evidence of this is that some of the individuals who the Prophet ﷺ, some new Muslims who the Prophet ﷺ gave from the wealth of zakat, in order to, because these were influential people. So by giving them money from zakat, the hope was that they will, their hearts will be drawn closer, and they will go and give da'wah to their people because they are people of influence, and their tribes will accept Islam. Okay? These people, many of them, they came back during the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and they asked for zakat, and Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and some of the names are even mentioned, Uyaynah bin Hisn, and others are mentioned, that they came and they asked for zakat, and Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he intended to give them zakat, and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he refused. He said that, this was something that we used to give you when we were weak and you were strong, and today Allah has bestowed glory and dignity upon the believers, and we're not going to give you from zakat anymore. And they went back to Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu and said that, are you the Khalifa or is he the Khalifa? This was their question. And but the Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, due to his insistence and his confidence in his stance, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu says that seeing his confidence, I was also inspired by his confidence in his stance, and I also adopted his stance. And Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu did not give the mu'allafatul qulub from the wealth of zakat, so those individuals. Therefore, looking at these narrations, the dominant position in the Hanafi school is that this category no longer exists. It's no longer permissible to give someone from the wealth of zakat simply to draw them nearer to Islam. However, this is a difference of opinion, and this is the position of the Hanafi school, but the other schools don't agree with this. And the mu'allafatul qulub does still exist, and there is a famous a difference of opinion in this regard. And if anybody is interested, this question was posed last year or the year before, and I wrote a paper about this specific the topic of mu'allafatul qulub and whether or not it applies. And for example, Dr. Wahba al-Zuhaili, rahimahullah, the famous Syrian scholar, he was famously of the opinion that this category still does exist, and he was even of the opinion that it is permissible for Muslims in the West to use zakat money to basically buy a favor from even non-Muslim entities. So using zakat money for things like lobbying politically, this was something that was permissible according to, and this is not like, the reason I'm referencing him is he was not just some nobody, right? He's Dr. Wahba al-Zuhaili was a famous scholar, recently passed away. His most famous work was al-Fiqh al-Islami wa adillatuhu, in this 9 or 10 volume book that he wrote on comparing all four madhahib, and this you can call this his magnum opus. This was a magnificent work. We have, or I have a copy over here, this was his opinion. But this was his opinion. That doesn't mean just that everybody has to agree with this opinion, but for the sake of being transparent, this is not an opinion that everybody agrees upon, but this was the opinion of one of our famous contemporary scholars who just recently passed away. Zakat collectors, so this is number 6, that those people who are commissioned by the government or by the people to collect zakat. So this, to a degree, still makes sense, that although sometimes this last category is used to justify extraordinary expenses, right? So if a charity is collecting zakat, and it is permissible for them to use zakat to cover portions of their overhead for those people that are, let's say, like there is a charity that is collecting zakat to distribute in a particular area. Now, obviously, they're not just going to, it's not magically going to appear in that area. There has to be somebody that goes there, that works for this charity, that distributes this. It is permissible to cover the expenses and the salaries of those employees using zakat funds, right? However, some caution should be exercised here, because oftentimes the permissible leads to the impermissible in this regard, right? So yes, this is permissible to cover their salaries and their expenses from the wealth of zakat that they are distributing, but sometimes this, this also bleeds into other things, right? That, covering other overhead costs, and one should be conservative in this regard, right? And you can see there are some charities that have a 100% zakat policy, for example, that it's not that they don't have an overhead. Every charity has an overhead, but they just cover their overhead from other sources of revenue and not from zakat, and this is just to avoid this potential gray area, right? So these are the categories of eligible recipients of zakat. These are some people who are not eligible to receive zakat. One's parents, grandparents, and children. So usul and furu'. So your parents, your grandparents, your children, they are not eligible to receive zakat from you. Your in-laws, for example. So if your wife's parents, or if you are a woman, your husband's parents are eligible recipients of zakat, then you can give them zakat, right? You just can't give your own parents zakat. So this is, so like when we call in-laws mother and father, that's a cultural thing. Otherwise, it's not a bad thing. That's fine out of respect if somebody calls them. But technically, they are not your mother and father, right? They are her mother and father. So therefore, if they are eligible recipients of zakat, if they are eligible, if they are poor, they are needy, then you can give them zakat, your zakat. She cannot give them her zakat, but you can give them your zakat. And likewise, if your parents are eligible, then your wife from her zakat, she can support them. It's your own parents and your children, right? That you cannot give zakat. One spouse, you can also not give zakat to your wife or to your husband. A non-Muslim, right? You cannot give zakat to a non-Muslim, except in the opinion of those who still allow the mu'allafatul qulub category. Institutions, masajid, madaris, schools, hospitals, you cannot give zakat directly to an institution, right? So, because although in Western law, institutions are treated as people, technically, right? So it's like that's why you can take a company to court. The company is not a walking, talking thing, right? So when you take a company to court, you're taking an entity that exists on paper, right? So like the people that come to defend the company are not the company. They are representatives of something that exists only on paper. So this is a Western law concept, right? So this is something that it's fine to a degree, but when it comes to zakat, you cannot give an entity that doesn't have in actual physical walking, talking, breathing presence. You cannot give it zakat. That's why you can't use zakat to build masajid, for example. You can't donate zakat for just the upkeep, the maintenance, and the running expenses of the masjid. So that's why zakat is kept separate, because it is given only to the eligible recipients of the zakat. Yes, you can make masajid and schools your agents for distribution of zakat, and this is generally what happens usually. It's not that you are giving the masjid zakat, but it's not the masjid that you are giving zakat. You are making the masjid the agent for your distribution of zakat. So they will distribute it on your behalf to those who are eligible to receive it. So this is, if you have the ability to actually give it yourself, this is the best option. If you, and charity and zakat, if you have eligible relatives, right? Whether they are in this country or they are in some other country. If they are relatives, as long as they are not your parents or your children or your grandparents, you should begin there, right? So if you have like aunts, uncles, cousins, whoever it is that are eligible to receive zakat, you should begin there. This is who you should begin to your zakat distribution with, followed by those who are close to you in your community. And also then finally those who are in need anywhere in the world, right? So always begin with your relatives. If they are eligible to receive your zakat, then you should begin with them. You will get a dual reward. One is obviously for giving your zakat, and one is for showing kindness and maintaining the ties of kinship. I can take your questions if you have any, inshallah. Yes. Can you give zakat for wells? To build wells. No, you can't give zakat to build wells, because that, again, the transfer of ownership doesn't take place. You can give zakat to a poor person to dig a well. That's like, if somebody says that, there is no water over here, then you can give zakat to a person, right? And but you can't make it a condition of your zakat that you can only use it to do this. Right? There can be an unsaid expectation, right, that this person will use it there. But technically, right, if this person says, we need water in my village, and you said, okay, how much does a well cost? And they say, okay, it costs this much, and you give that much to this person with zakat, with the understanding that they will use it to dig the well, that is permissible. But then if this person goes and does something else with that money, then, there's Islamically, there's no recourse there, right? Because you cannot make it a condition to use zakat money for something specific. Yes? Yes. So the person who is for any like infrastructure project, including a well, you can't use zakat directly to like dig the well. So you have to give it to someone who is eligible recipient of zakat, and they can, if they want, they can use it to dig a well. Yeah. Yeah. So then you stop paying zakat on it. No, you can't write off other zakat payments using that. So what you paid, you will be rewarded for, but because the thing is that you can proactively give zakat. So like if you have an idea of how much zakat will be due for you next year, so this happens all the time, right? Let's say you have already given your zakat for this year, and then there's there's a calamity and there's a need for zakat. It is permissible for you, most people, they're not waiting to win the lottery or something like that. They have a reasonable estimate of how much zakat that is going to be due upon them. It is permissible for you to proactively give it, but it requires an intention. So in this circumstance, the intention was not present over there to give zakat for future amounts. That is, your intention was that. So that's yes. Yes. Yeah. So only parents, usul and furu', you can't give zakat. Everybody else, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, anybody you can give zakat as long as they are eligible to receive it. Anybody else? No? Okay, inshallah. No. You don't have to inform the recipient that it is zakat as long as you know that the recipient is eligible to receive it. That's, because the only condition is the transfer of ownership and niyyah. Their knowledge is not a condition of the validity of zakat. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No. So the day of Eid, so the first of Shawwal, the day of Eid al-Adha, and 3 days after it. So these 5 days of the year you shouldn't fast, regardless of whether you're fasting the Psalm of Dawood or anything else, or even if it falls on a Monday or Thursday, or these 5 days of the year one should not fast. Otherwise, you can continue to fast the Psalm of Dawood. So the Psalm of Dawood is fasting one day and not fasting the next day. So fasting alternate days basically. So this is, there is evidence of this in the Sunnah. For those who perform this fast, they should stop on the 28th of Sha'ban. Because there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ to not fast 1 or 2 days before Ramadan. So definitively 1 or 2 days means 28 or 29, and if there is a 30th, then the 30th as well. After Ramadan, so on the 2nd of Shawwal, you can begin fasting again. So the day after Eid. You can just start on the 2nd day of Eid. So the 2nd of Shawwal, so the day after Eid. It's impermissible to fast on Eid. It's haram. The food, it depends on which food bank. So our food bank over here, I'm sure that many of the people that come to the food bank, they are eligible for zakat, but we don't actually use zakat money for the food bank. In this masjid, the money that is sadaqah money, that's actually what's used for the food bank, because we don't verify zakat eligibility for food bank applicants. So therefore we don't use zakat money, we use sadaqah money. So I'm sure that many of the people are eligible recipients of zakat, but it's just we don't use zakat for the food bank because we don't verify eligibility. We only do that for zakat applications. Yes? Yeah. That person is liable because it's a condition of, so it's originally your responsibility if you are loaning money that you have to give zakat, but it is permissible to make it a condition for that person that they have to give zakat, right? So in that case, it's that person's responsibility to give zakat on that money. That's actually a good thing to do, right? Especially when it comes to like bad debt. So, even if the person doesn't give you your money back, at least he's not going to, he's not going to leave you with a bill, right? So I think this is, you can make that then, inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanallah.